Welcome. This is Stephen Lee, and this is life and the living of it. Today's episode is going to be about looks, physical appearance. I'm going to start off with an original poem I wrote some time ago. It was going to be the opening of a book I was going to write, and perhaps it still will be. It is called The Blind Butterfly. There's nothing so sad as a blind butterfly, said the young boy with the burns on his face. And why is that sad? Asked the man with no eyes. Because the butterfly doesn't know if it's beautiful or ugly unless he is told by those around him, and they never seem to agree. Ah, I see, said the man with no eyes. You forget that I know exactly what the butterfly feels, but the others only see what they see, not what is real. The butterfly can see what is there, but not what is seen. So he can choose to be as beautiful as he wishes to be. Can I be as beautiful as I wish to be, even though I know what I look like on the outside, some say is not pretty at all, said the boy with the burns on his face. Yes, for I look at you with eyes that you can't see, and see what those with eyes will never see. And what is that? Asked the boy with the burns on his face. That you already are a butterfly, said the man with no eyes. Then I will be a beautiful one, said the young boy with the burns on his face. I always knew you were one, said the man with no eyes. Now I wrote that because I have been around burn patients. And I've also been around people who have had disfigurements. I used to work with emotionally disturbed and troubled youth, and more than one had the physical and emotional scars of their history. But I've also been around people who were born very attractive, and people who were born just plain. And while in a perfect world it shouldn't make a difference how we look, or what scars we have or have not, it does. Years ago, when I was on maintenance staff at a summer camp, I got to know someone in the dark. My habit back then, because I had trouble sleeping, was to go off to an empty cabin and, with no one around, relax, lay down, and try to get to sleep. Well, one night I went up into that cabin and I sat down on the bed, and I realized I was not alone. This girl and I started talking, and we talked for hours and hours in complete darkness. Perhaps because it was dark, our talk became very deep, very vulnerable, and very revealing. And in the space of all of the history that poured out between us, I began to really love the person in front of me, even though, and perhaps because, I didn't know what she looked like, nor did she know what I looked like. But I decided that regardless of what she looked like, I had already fallen in love with the person that she was. Not in a romantic sense, but in a deep friendship, a deep affection. So no matter what she looked like, I would not treat her any differently than as a dear new friend. And yet when we exited that cabin and came under the lights, I noticed that she was stunning. Absolutely stunning. However, I had already gotten to know her in the dark. I already had emotional ties to her of friendship, and that's how they stayed. Many years later, I found out I was one of the only two men on staff, including those who were married, that did not hit on her, that did not make sexual innuendos, yes, of a 15-year-old, and that she appreciated that, and that even years after that, in fact decades after that, I found out that she became very, very tired of people only judging her from the outside, of instantly thinking that she was much more sexual than she was, much more quote-unquote loose than she was, much less intelligent than she was. She got really, really tired of it. On the other hand, I knew a guy at camp who was not good looking. He was plain, very long face, somewhat buck teeth, very ungraceful, kind of awkward and gangly, and yet he had such a way about him that a lot of the older women, and of course the female staff, half fell in love with this awkward, gangly, tall guy. He was funny and he was charming. He made people around him feel like they were the only ones in the room. He had charisma. And I began to wonder if he had to develop this because he really wasn't that good looking, or if this was something natural that came out of him. Or perhaps it was because he was just normal looking that everyone felt very comfortable around him. I tell these two stories because what we look like, even from a young age, does seem to have something to do with how people treat us and eventually how we treat ourselves. Though I didn't really understand how deep this went until one time I held a devotion during one of the weeks that I volunteered at camp. And in this devotion, I had each camper there go back and take a look at their lives. Look at the parents that they were born to and the family that they were in the time in which they came into this world. And to look at their bodies, their faces, the friends that they had, their brothers, their sisters, to look at how people treated them. And part of the devotion was try to make sense. How did all these things tie in to God using them for God's purpose to help other people love themselves and love other people? If they were an indispensable part of God's plan, then why were they given the bodies they were, or the families they were, or born at the time that they were, or have the friends that they had? Well, I had these people go off in twos and threes and really talk with each other about their life and about what possible role they would have in helping other people love themselves and love others. And it was about 1 o'clock in the morning when we came back together and I started hearing their stories. And one of the cheerleaders that was there, who was a very attractive girl, started talking about Marcia, her friend. Now, Marcia was just plain looking. I didn't even realize that they were friends. The cheerleader, Kathy, started saying, you know, I couldn't talk to the other cheerleaders and I couldn't talk to the other popular girls because they were all, and I was all about clothes and makeup and looks and boys. But I could talk to Marcia. I could talk to her about anything. And Marcia pretty much saved my life several times. She was the best friend to me. And while she was saying this, I saw tears just develop in Marcia's eyes, and she just started crying. And I waited, and Marcia finally said, I always felt so ugly around y'all. And the cheerleader said, no, you're the friend that mattered to me. And they hugged, and a whole bunch of other people cried, and I had tears in my eyes. That for Marcia, being just plain hid the fact that she was anything but plain. Hid the fact that she was the best friend this cheerleader could have had. A few days after that week, I wrote Blind Butterfly, based on that devotion. I also realized, much like Marcia, I'm plain. There's nothing special about how I look. I'm middle of the road. I'm not easy on the eyes. But I have learned, perhaps because of that, to be easy on the heart. And perhaps I can call myself a butterfly, and a beautiful one at that. And this is life, and the living of it.